be the Son of Heaven. I have decided that you will be the new Lord of 10,000 years. You will be the Son of Heaven.
At the age of 3, he ascended to the Dragon Throne. As a boy, he was the absolute ruler of Imperial China.
Stop! The Emperor will walk.
His life filled with sights and sounds no other human being on Earth could experience.
I think the Emperor is the loneliest boy on Earth.
I want a modern wife, Johnston, who speaks English and French, and who can dance the quick step.
As a man, he became its captive.
I do not want to escape anymore. I want to rule.
A victim of its violent history.
I stop.
I am accused of being a traitor, a collaborator, and a counter-revolutionary.
It is not an accusation.
A prisoner of his own power.
Do you think a man can become emperor again?
Yes.
The Japanese. They are getting closer to him every day.
He was Pu Yi, Lord of 10,000 years.
10,000 years!
The last emperor. Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor.
09年的时候，做这个中国的皇帝的这个地位。
1906. He's the nephew of the reigning Qing dynasty emperor of China, Guangxu. The Qings are Manchus from the northeast of China. They've been ruling the vast country since 1644. For nearly 3 years, Pu Yi lives quietly in this palace in Beijing. His father is the emperor's brother, Zaifeng, but dramatic events sweeping China are about to change little Pu Yi's life forever. Whilst industrial and political revolutions are spreading worldwide, China retains a feudal society that has existed for over 2,000 years. At the dawn of the 20th century, civil unrest and local conflicts between competing warlords are widespread. The times are ideal for major political upheaval. The Qing rulers remain isolated in their palace in Beijing, the Forbidden City. For the Qings, the palace represents the very center of the civilized world. They'll only venture out to the Summer Palace, a tranquil retreat they've constructed for themselves nearby. Although Guangxu is emperor, the real power is wielded by a remarkable woman, the emperor's aunt, Empress Dowager Cixi. Now in her 70s, Cixi has been at the imperial palaces since the age of 16, and has successively been an imperial concubine, then consort, and finally empress. Over the years, she's gained in power and influence until even Puyi's uncle, the emperor, kneels before her. Her technique is to dominate the reigning emperor from a very young age. First, her own 6-year-old son, then Guangxu from the age of 3. Now in his 30s, he's still childless, and Cixi looks for a new boy emperor to manipulate. When Guangxu falls gravely ill with a mysterious ailment, Cixi issues what will turn out to be her final decree. 2-year-old Puyi is to succeed as emperor and is summoned to her presence in the Forbidden City. Neither his father nor mother is allowed to accompany him. The little boy is terrified by the palace. He would later describe the scene.
There was this eerie curtain before me, and behind it, an extremely ugly and thin face.
The timing is extraordinary. Emperor Guangxu dies the very next day, aged 37. Almost unbelievably, Cixi herself dies only 24 hours later. And just like that, tiny Puyi is suddenly Emperor of China. Puyi is placed on the gold-gilded throne as the 10th Emperor of the Qing dynasty. Puyi is too young to understand the momentous events sweeping the country. Kuomintang party leader Sun Yat-sen is calling for a republic. For many, it's an opportunity to end the Manchu minority's feudal dominance. For decisions, the Qing court relies on Puyi's father, Zai Feng, acting as Prince Regent, and the previous emperor's widow, Empress Dowager Long Yu. When a rebellion spreads throughout China, they order it crushed, only to find their army no longer obeys its Manchu commander. They're forced to appoint popular general Yuan Sukai to resolve the crisis. He's a cunning and ambitious politician who quickly engineers Zai Fang's resignation as regent. With Zai Fang out of the way, Yuan bluntly informs Empress Long Yu that the young emperor Puyi has no choice but to abdicate. In January 1912, the Republic of China is proclaimed, with Sun Yat-sen announced as its first president. A few days after Puyi's 6th birthday, a tearful Empress Long Yu bows to the inevitable and places her seal on the act of abdication of the Qing emperor. The terms agreed by the new republic are known as the Articles of Favorable Treatment of the Emperor. They allow Puyi to retain his imperial title and also a substantial allowance to maintain a court and household of eunuchs and servants. A few months after the abdication, a broken-hearted Empress Long Yu dies, and Puyi's father Zai Fang returns to oversee the curious imperial court that now remains. Sun Yat-sen relinquishes the presidency to Yuan Sukai. On New Year's Day of 1913, Yuan stages his presidential investiture at the Forbidden City. With this, the great Qing Empire, which has ruled China for 268 years, is officially gone, marking the end of 2,132 years of feudal society.
New York's iconic Waldorf Astoria was purchased by a Chinese company in 2014 for nearly $2 billion. After the acquisition, President Obama stopped staying here due to security concerns, breaking with the decades-long tradition of U.S. presidents staying here during their trips to New York. The move was highly symbolic of Chinese money flowing into the U.S.
Billions of dollars flow into the U.S. from China in the form of investments every year, and in some parts of New York City, it's widespread. Chinese investments include 28 Liberty Street, Baccarat Hotel, and a stake in the General Motors building.
Bank of China agreed to pay nearly $600 million to buy this Midtown skyscraper in 2014.
A big name gaining attention for her investments is real estate mogul Zhang Xin.
She's a Chinese billionaire whose family acquired a 49% stake in this building, Park Avenue Plaza, back in 2011.
And she came together with investors to buy 40% of General Motors building in 2013. And then there's a company called H&A Group. It poured billions of dollars into properties in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and more. But it's not just real estate.
In 2012, Chinese conglomerate Dalian Wanda Group purchased AMC. The $2.6 billion deal would make it the world's largest cinema chain.
Chinese investors also bought a $3.5 billion stake in Legendary Entertainment, the company behind Matt Damon's Great Wall movie. In 2016, Chinese investment into the U.S. hit a high.
The next year, though, it declined significantly, reversing the trend.
Just take a look at the China Investment Monitor, which tracks Chinese direct investment into the United States. The figures have generally been on an upward trend since the tracker was launched in 2000, peaking at nearly $46 billion in 2016. Then, investments dropped off. So, why the sudden decline? Well, to understand that, we have to go back to the original surge. You see, Chinese people and businesses were growing wealthier, but they were worried about China's explosive growth slowing. After all, their holdings are priced in the yuan, and a drop in the yuan against other currencies would mean the value of their assets goes down. So mainland companies started buying up assets in other countries like the US. It was their way of diversifying their portfolios, hedging their bets against a downturn at home. But all of that money moving from Chinese bank accounts into foreign real estate and companies made Beijing anxious. The government was worried all of that capital abroad would do what Chinese businesses were concerned about in the first place: drain value from the domestic economy and depress the local currency. So through various means, the Chinese government clamped down on money leaving the country. That's what's called capital controls, and encouraged their firms to bring back some of the money they sent away. Beijing was particularly focused on China's four biggest private conglomerates: H&A Group, Anbang Insurance Group, Fosun International, and Dalian Wanda Group. Earlier I mentioned the purchase of the Waldorf Astoria in New York. That was made by Anbang, which had spent tens of billions of dollars around the world buying up high-profile properties. But in early 2018, China's government seized the company and even detained its chairman. That means China's government sort of owns the iconic New York staple. Then there's the Hainan Airlines, or H&A Group. The company began as a tiny airline in 1993, but today it's a global conglomerate, owning real estate, hotels, and tourism companies. In 2017, it was named the 170th biggest company in the world, with annual revenue of more than $50 billion. As part of its investment spree, H&A bought Radisson Hotels Group, a $6.5 billion stake in Hilton Hotels, and a stake in Deutsche Bank.
This building, 245 Park Avenue, was purchased by China's H&A Group for $2.2 billion in 2017, making it one of the priciest office building purchases in New York history. But a year later, H&A Group was said to be looking for a buyer.
Proof that China's effort to rein in these companies is working. Just look at these assets in the U.S. either for sale or being sold by some of China's biggest companies. Meanwhile, the U.S. is making it more difficult for foreign buyers to invest, adding more roadblocks, and in some cases even citing national security concerns. The U.S. blocked a deal by Alibaba-backed Ant Financial to try and buy MoneyGram. Meanwhile, H&A Group dropped its bid to acquire hedge fund Skybridge Capital. Chinese investment in the U.S. has leveled out to where it was before it surged earlier this decade, but whether it will fall further or make a comeback remains to be seen.
Hey guys, it's Upton. Thanks for watching. For more of our videos, check out...
We're all too familiar with the work-play balance we strive to juggle in the 21st century. It's virtually impossible, right? We're often faced with a long and busy commute to work, using dated public transport or busy highways, only to find ourselves sitting in a dull office all day long. Well, Tencent is about to revolutionize the work-play life of 80,000 people in the city of Shenzhen with a next-century approach. Following Huawei's campus-style city, Chinese technology company Tencent The driving power behind instant messaging apps WeChat and QQ has made promises to build an entire mini-city off the banks of the Pearl River in Shenzhen, where the company has its headquarters. Both are located in the Guangdong province of southern China, near the metropolis of Hong Kong. Said to occupy just 2 square kilometers, or 3/4 of a square mile, this city within a city is designed to accommodate up to 80,000 people. Similar in shape and size to Midtown Manhattan and built on reclaimed land on the Pearl River estuary, Tencent City, currently unofficially referred to as Net City, is expected to feature not only apartments and offices, but shops, schools, sports facilities, entertainment venues, and other public amenities, making it almost self-reliant. Integrated with the rest of Shenzhen City via bridges, ferries, and its existing subway system, design partner Jonathan Ward stresses that it's not meant to be an isolated, secure island. He envisages Net City attracting thousands of visitors and inspiring the creation of many more mini-cities such as this one. Net City, according to design partner Jonathan Ward, will be different to other closed campuses offered by other large tech companies, as it aims to be an extension to the existing city, welcoming visitors with its open doors. The American architecture mastermind behind the design, NBBJ, is expected to subcontract the city across multiple architectural firms. Buildings will range from 1 to 30 floors, featuring futuristic and modern yet familiar designs, and flowing terraces to focus the eye on the shoreline and pockets of nature. After all, Net City should be welcoming to the next generation, not frightening. Spokespeople for NBBJ have confirmed that the city will blur the line between personal and professional lives, which will help with workers' time management, giving them more time to enjoy their surroundings. Both companies responsible for making this city a reality hope that the positive effects will far outweigh the negative effects of blurring this boundary, but this is yet to be seen. It will be a vital hub for Shenzhen, providing space for thousands of new jobs and even more occupants on such a limited footprint. Rooftop solar panels and gardens, along with wastewater capturing systems, will help to reduce the carbon footprint of this city and make it one of the greenest spaces in the city of Shenzhen. Just like a smart home, this city will feature smart sensors which will track the city's environmental performance while aiming to create a healthier environment. The designers have even taken into consideration the rising sea levels and have planned to raise Net City to a level that allows it to be future-proof. Mangrove trees serve not only to produce oxygen, but as a natural storm barrier which will break strong winds and waves along its shorelines. Although regular cars will be able to access some parts of the city, dive deeper and you will only see pedestrianised walkways and self-driving vehicles. This green corridor featuring zero and low-emission transport such as buses and bikes helps to eliminate unnecessary traffic, making Net City a more calming experience. Both NBBJ and Tencent hope that this spot of tranquility in a city with more than 12 million inhabitants will relax workers and inspire them to dream big and work hard. Providing construction of its new headquarters, Seafront Towers, this 250-metre-tall skyscraper features indoor leisure facilities such as a climbing wall and sports courts and is said to hold up to 12,000 people. We are also starting to see other companies present similar offerings across Asia, with Toyota suggesting the transformation of one of its existing sites. This 3/4 of a square kilometre or 1/4 of a square mile site will house 20,000 workers and will be home to hydrogen fuel cell autonomous vehicles, smart home technology and even robots. Huawei's European-themed campus is designed to accommodate 25,000 employees, but is larger than many campuses at 3.5 square miles. This is because it will be split into 12 separate areas, each with its own European theme, such as Verona and even Paris. Private trams make up the mini-city's public transport, while replicas of many of Europe's attractions play home to offices and accommodation, including a mock Versailles chateau. Attention to detail is key here, with Budapest's Liberty Bridge forming a crossing over one of the area's waterways. It's said that the coronavirus pandemic has driven more people online, allowing the company's social media and gaming platforms to grow. This financial boost has allowed construction at Net City to start later this year. It will take around 7 years to complete and will be carried out in 3 phases. What do you think of this new campus city? If this is to be the next way of life, would you be happy balancing work and play as Tencent suggests, or is it important that they are distinctly separate?
The order of appearance is symbolic. The first person to emerge is the head of the party for the next 5 years. At the most recent event in October 2022, that person was Xi Jinping, China's president for the last 10 years, who walked out in the top spot a historic 3rd time after getting rid of China's presidential term limit that restricted all his predecessors to 2 terms. A signal that he may be planning to stay in power for life. The world hasn't seen a Chinese leader like this since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic of China, whose ruthless dictatorship scarred the Chinese people for generations. Xi's been compared to Mao a lot, and he clearly draws from Mao's playbook. But there's something else that connects these two. When Xi was a boy, Mao ruined his life. Generations apart, their paths crossed unexpectedly, and a teenage Xi from an elite family in Beijing ended up in exile, condemned to hard labor in the countryside. 50 years later, Xi is one of the most powerful political figures in the world and the only leader since Mao to have unchecked power over China. So, how did he go from being banished in his country to taking complete control of it? He was even born. It goes back to when a bloody civil war was raging in China. A group of radical communist revolutionaries, including Mao, gained influence over large swaths of mainland China and controlled a communist military called the Red Army that fought the Nationalist Party ruling the Republic of China at the time. At this point, the communists were losing bad. The bulk of their army was pinned down here, in a communist-controlled region originally established by Mao, now surrounded by nationalist forces. And they were running low on food. So the Red Army decided to launch a bold attack to break through the nationalist forces and evacuate the roughly 130,000 communist soldiers and civilians stuck here. Or they made their move. and attacked a weaker part of the enemy line. They broke through, and even though their numbers quickly dropped, with thousands dying and thousands more fleeing to the countryside, around 86,000 stuck together and pushed on. This was the beginning of a year-long historic retreat called the Long March, the journey to establish a new communist base far from the nationalist forces. Mao, who used to be a military leader, wasn't in charge at this time. He'd insisted on using guerrilla tactics, which had heavily influenced the Red Army earlier in the war, but that approach had fallen out of favor and he was demoted. The Long March changed that. After escaping the siege here, the Red Army continued to suffer relentless attacks by the pursuing nationalist army. The military leaders of the march had pushed for a more traditional wartime strategy of direct confrontation rather than Mao's guerrilla tactics. And the result was catastrophic for the Red Army. Less than half of the original escape group survived the first 3 months alone. So it was at this first stopping point where Communist Party leader Zhou Enlai handed military leadership back to Mao. And Mao picked an endpoint for the march, here, 800 miles away in rural northern China. But they didn't go straight for it. Mao led the Red Army deep into the mountains, where he predicted lighter resistance. And he was right. But the journey was still brutal. It was 9 more months of non-stop marching and fighting along this several thousand-mile route, before they ultimately arrived in northern China, where a guerrilla base led by a communist revolutionary named Shi Zhongshun offered Mao's army refuge, bringing the Long March to an end. Father. And he became the de facto head of the party as well as the military, entrusted with rebuilding the army to take on the nationalist forces for total control of China.
Wherever and however the Red troops move into battle, they spread the glory of Mao Zedong.
This is a good stopping point in the story to talk about how power in the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, works. Officially, the highest level of authority is a group called the Central Committee, and is responsible for all of the party's major policy decisions. Within the Central Committee is a select group of officials called the Political Bureau, or Politburo. In most communist parties, like that of the former Soviet Union, the Politburo represents the most powerful members of the party besides the General Secretary. But the Chinese Communist Party has a key distinction that makes it unique. It has one more, even smaller selection of top officials who ultimately have the final say, an elite class of Politburo members called the Politburo Standing Committee. This group, which includes the General Secretary, holds supreme control over the Central Committee, dictates the will of the party, and is in full control of the Central Military Commission, which oversees China's defense. Mao's promotion during the Long March landed him here, in the highest position of the military and the Politburo Standing Committee. Even though he was considered the de facto head of the party when the Long March ended in 1935, he officially became head of the party in 1943. With both the party and the military under his control, Mao began to exploit the system to ensure he remained at the top for the rest of his life. At Mao's first National Congress as the official party leader in 1945, the party introduced a resolution that brought his influence to a whole new level. It unified the party around a single understanding of its history and declared Mao's political ideology, later called Mao Zedong Thought, or Maoism, as the unquestioned guiding principle of the Chinese Communist Party. Basically, Mao's ideas or policy decisions could no longer be challenged by anyone. It was here he unveiled his equivalent at the time of the Politburo Standing Committee, the 4 other top party leaders, all long marchers deeply loyal to Mao, like Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, who would go on to hold some of the most powerful positions in the future government. 4 years later, Mao declared final victory for the communists in the decades-long Chinese Civil War and established a new country, the People's Republic of China, or PRC.
Mao Zedong, once a lowly party worker, now assumed the stature of a dominant figure in all of Eastern Asia.
And try to double down on their mistreatment of American workers are making a mistake. President Trump has a spine of steel, and he will not break, and America will not break under his leadership. He is guided by a firm belief that America must be able to produce essential goods for our own people and export them to the rest of the world. A strong America cannot be solely dependent on foreign countries for our food, medicines, and critical minerals. I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that Xi and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
So China has to call first?
The Chinese want to make a deal, they just don't know how to do it, but the president will be implementing these 104% tariffs on China tonight.
Economies are fighting a trade war. Tensions between Washington and Beijing are escalating and China is hitting back. It's announced its own tariffs on American products in response to those imposed by US President Donald Trump. They include a 34% tariff on all US goods and restrictions on exports of rare earth minerals. Recently, Trump said he's willing to negotiate, even suggesting the popular TikTok app, which is owned by China, could be a bargaining chip. But with global financial markets sliding, how far are both countries willing to go? And will this back and forth change trade policies? We'll explore all these issues with our guests in a moment, but first this report from Katya Lopez-Hodoyan.
Trade between the U.S. and China is at a financial crossroads. Beijing has retaliated against Donald Trump's latest tariffs with its own measures, including a 34% tariff on all U.S. goods and restrictions on exports of rare earth minerals.
China, first row.
President Donald Trump insists his 54% tariffs on China are payback. He says Beijing has taken advantage of trade policies that hurt American industries. But recently, he suggested he's willing to make a deal. The sale of Chinese-owned TikTok app, widely popular in the U.S., could be part of the bargain.
We have a situation with TikTok where China will probably say, we'll approve a deal, but will you do something on the tariff? The tariffs give us great power to negotiate.
Next month, Washington also plans to end the so-called de minimis rule, which allowed goods cheaper than $800 to enter the U.S. tax-free. The loophole has widely benefited Chinese e-commerce companies like Shein and Temu. China has said it's willing to talk and negotiate.
The Economic and Trade Departments of China and the US have maintained ongoing communication. China is willing to engage in exchanges with the US on important issues to resolve mutual concerns.
This message is for parents who don't have life insurance. For as little as
Tariffs on dozens of countries are also causing upheaval with other trading partners in Asia. It could ultimately lead some to pivot towards Beijing instead of Washington.
A real question is what I would call dealability. By that I mean the willingness now of the U.S. administration to negotiate with countries over market access, over legitimate frustrations and grievances that they have with countries.
With the trade war now underway and global markets slumping, it will test how far Washington and Beijing are willing to go. Katya Lopez-Hodoyan, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Of the American public, 53% who do not say that Trump has too much power. They either says he has too little power or the right amount of power. So the idea, that argument that Donald Trump is quote-unquote a king, that I don't think holds with the American people. It does hold maybe with 47%, but with the majority of folk, they believe Donald Trump's doing something completely differently, and they don't believe he has too much power, and the executive orders he signed certainly suggest he's no lame duck. He is, as I said at the beginning, a soaring eagle.
Well, a big part of that, of course, is the way Trump is framing his presidency. Just as he campaigned, it's a war between him and a failing establishment.
I'm proud to be the president for the workers, not the outsourcers. The president who stands up for Main Street, not Wall Street, who protects the middle class, not the political class, and who defends America, not trade cheaters all over the globe. They're trade cheaters. They cheated on us. They cheated with tariffs on us. They stole our money. They stole our jobs.
Well, that message has united MAGA, but not the method. Elon Musk said that trade advisor Peter Navarro is dumber than a sack of bricks before apologizing to the bricks. Navarro called Musk a car assembler who should stay in his lane. The White House has no problem. It welcomes all debate.
These are obviously two individuals who have very different views on trade and on tariffs. Boys will be boys, and we will let their public sparring continue. And you guys should all be very grateful that we have the most transparent administration in history. And I think it also speaks to the president's willingness to hear from all sides.
Well, maybe there is something in that. President Biden gave 36 press conferences in 4 years. Trump seems to do 36 every week. While advisors point the finger at each other over the means of making America great again, Democrats are still pointing the finger at voters.
A felon who is more interested in loyalty, who's more interested in retribution, who's more interested in grift than in democracy. And we chose a felon because we didn't want to elect a black woman.
Well, tariffs are a big gamble with high stakes, and as I've said several times, I don't know if it will work. What definitely won't work is continuing to say half of Americans are racist bigots. Democrats are fuming over President Trump's great power, but they're a big part of the reason that he has it again. To debate all this and more, I'm joined by Chuck Todd, host of the Chuck Toddcast, Jamal Bowman, the former Democrat congressman for New York, Matt Schlapp, the chairman of CPAC, and Lindy Lee, the former fundraiser for the Democratic National Committee. Well, welcome to all of you. Chuck Todd, welcome to Uncensored, making your debut. Congratulations on breaking out into this brave new world. Which I think you'll find very exciting.
Yeah.
Of course. It's great to see you, Chuck. Look, you've been in Washington a long time. You've seen it all before. I don't think any of us have ever seen anything quite like what is happening here. I've got to be honest, I just don't know if it could work. I mean, I'm keeping an open mind, as I do with all things Trump, that if you get away from the often incendiary rhetoric and the kind of brutal methodology, is there a method to the madness? I'm looking at the markets this morning. You've got a full-blown trade war now between the United States and China, but the market's gone up on this news, which suggests to me that maybe, even on Wall Street, they're thinking, well, maybe it is time we had a gloves-off war over trade.
Well, I don't know if it's going to work either. History says it's unlikely to work, and I think the real challenge for President Trump is it's not what he's trying to do. What he's trying to do is popular, right? Bring back manufacturing, bring back more, Americans should make more things in America. That is that is a unifying idea. But the way he's gone about it, I think, has both been politically damaging to himself, and then obviously it could be catastrophic to the economy. It's not, to me, dissimilar to what happened to President Biden and the Afghanistan withdrawal. The idea of getting out of Afghanistan, that was universally popular, right? That had 60, 70%, yes, get out. How he got out became a test of his competency, or frankly incompetency, of his administration. And when you look at how President Trump has done this, there's a good op-ed in the New York Times today, Owen Cass, who's a defender of the larger idea of what President Trump is doing, but simply seems to be sort of at his wit's end at sort of how he's trying to do it. Politically, he should have done his tax cut first and sort of essentially gradually increased and gradually talked about how he was going to do his tariffs. You do a little bit at a time, 3 months.
Has been, how can you be supporting Trump? You're going to get destroyed in the midterms. How can you support Trump? He's going to lose the American people. How can you support Trump? He's going to be the least popular president in our history. And what's turned out to be over the course of the last 8 years is he's actually turned into to be one of the most consequential presidents in our history. And there's a couple things that you have to realize, which is this trade war is going on already. He's just decided to engage it. So there was this
exciting 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology, they steal it, they manufacture it, sell it back here. Never has an administration.
400% tariffs? What would
I
that
want
look like?
Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field.
Now, Jamal, people might say, well, that's outrageous and so on, but he's not a fool, Kevin O'Leary. He's a very successful guy, and he believes that what Trump is doing is not only right, but not aggressive enough, that you've got to take the war to China because they've been waging an economic war for a sustained period of time now, and it will eventually, potentially, put them above the United States.
I mean, for me, the simple question is, how is this trade war, how are these tariffs going to help the American people? And when I say the American people, I mean the working class American people. Is this going to help bring down the cost of childcare, the cost of groceries, the cost of utilities? Is this going to help create millions of jobs here in America and create a federal jobs guarantee? That's what Trump is saying. That's what his supporters are saying. But I would love to hear more about what the actual plan is. What is the best case scenario? What is the moderate scenario? And what is the worst case scenario? Right now, markets are inconsistent. And that inconsistency is not good for the American economy overall.
Is that Elon used is actually pretty clever. And I want to say, last time, Pierce, you questioned my loyalty. I want to say one thing, though. I lost like 25% of my net worth in the last couple of weeks because I am so heavy on the NASDAQ and tech stocks, yet I am willing to give Trump a chance. It's only been 4.5 trading days, so I'm willing to see how this is going to play out. And frankly, as Caroline Levitt just said a few hours ago, Trump has a spine of steel. I'm sorry. So let's just see who's going to blink first. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to China and the United States. It's really about these two countries.